no, no, no. Carter died from cancer.
Well, yeah,
Carnarvon, yeah, it's
and Carter lived another 60 years, like he lived till he was 64. So it's not like he died, like, and Carnarvon's death was, again, today, that would have been 100% preventable.
yeah.
He got septicemia from shaving, and he had a mosquito bite, and he'd been scratching at it, and it was infected, and he cut it, and of course, as soon as he did that, it just spread throughout the blood. And there was no antibiotics in 1922, so you were still looking at things like septicemia killing people pretty quickly. There just wasn't. Today you would have some penicillin, or some variation, and it would be a minor infection. I mean, septicemia can still be really serious today. Let's not, pretend it's not, but caught very early on, or even if he had have used some alcohol on his bug bite, he likely would have survived. But people didn't really think of that so much. The medical sort of progress that took place between the, say, 1918 and probably the 1960s is a pretty slow process,
Oh
right?
yeah.
After that, of course, we start to rapidly move forward. But so let's look at, yeah, the curse itself, the curse of the pharaoh, known as King Tut's curse, or ever since the tomb was discovered. So they sort of say, well, yes, there was these hieroglyphs stating that there was a curse on the tomb, except it really wasn't. It was a prayer, and it wasn't a cursed tomb. But like I said, for people who don't read hieroglyphs, if you've got workers telling you, oh my God, this is this,
Exactly.
of course
Exactly.
you're gonna,
Yeah.
you're gonna believe it. That prayer, those prayers have been deciphered many times over the years, by various, degrees of people who have knowledge of hieroglyphs. And even our understanding of hieroglyphs, and the reading of them and the understanding of them now, is much more than it was even when I went to university in the 1990s. It's excelled quite a bit, in terms of understanding, the what the symbols mean. And it's not like an alphabet. It's not like us going A, B, C, D. That's not how it works. You can assign a letter or a sound phonetically to the glyph itself, but it's more of a phonetic than it is an alphabet. And it's sort of the same thing with the runes, the Viking runes. People think it's an alphabet, and it's a sound, it's a phonetic, it's not really an alphabet. So the same thing here. So we're looking at, how many dozens of people were actually connected to this dig, right? I mean, there was dozens of them that were there even when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened up. And I mean, some people in that group may have had unexpected deaths, like Carnarvon himself. But at the same time, there's a lot of them who went on to, live a long time after the fact. So the sort of average age of people living after the fact, if you want to sort of do the math, and you do your addition and then you divide it by the number and ratio and all that, you're going to get about 23 to 25 years that people continue to live.
Hmm.
So, the curse really was just something that was put out there, I think, and again, grew legs of its own, and off it ran.
Yep.
Right. So, it's kind of interesting in that respect. But yeah, I mean, and Carter himself, as we know, he lived to age 64. And then one of Carter's teams, who was security, was a sergeant, and he actually was on that site for 7 years, round the clock. Can you
Wow.
imagine, like, living there for 7 years in the desert, round the clock? So he didn't leave. He probably had a day or two off here and there, and might have went into Cairo, but for the most part, he was there. And he was the, I guess, if you want to, let's just use it for a catch-all phrase, European. He was the person closest to Tutankhamun's remains at all times. So he lived, actually, he didn't even die until 1982. So he was an old man at that point, right? And the average age of people dying who were on that site is about 73 to 75 years old. So, and really, Carnarvon's death was accidental. And it's, I mean, it does make a great story, right? But so let's look at where the curse came from, because this is something that people never talk about. They never really talk about it, right? But when the tomb was opened in 1922, it was a huge event. It really was. It was one of the first ever intact tombs to be discovered, because all the other ones had been raided and pillaged, and everything had been stolen, and mummies had been broken up, and everything had been smashed. So they kind of had to really go out of their way to secure this site, right? Because of course it got into the newspapers, and then it went around the world.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, fast in those times for us, now it would be, oh, look what I found, type it on the social media, and an hour later it's everywhere. I mean, in those days, it probably took the better part of a month to, go across the globe, but it did. And so it was a huge story. And now you've got all these reporters who want to come to this site, right? They want to fly in, they want to take a steamer in, they want to, whatever it is, however they can get there, they want to get there. And they didn't want this. They didn't want all of these people there. So this is where this curse story really sprouted from. It made a good story that would keep people away, because let's face it, I think most people have some superstitious feeling within them that maybe they don't want to mess around with the fact that this tomb could possibly be cursed. So it does make for a good story, right?
Yeah.
It does keep people away. And that's something that was paramount for them at that time, in order for them to have, success, and to be able to go sort of move forward without the constant, barrage of paparazzi and reporters and things. So they really opened the tomb. There were no, effects on anybody as far as, the people who worked on the site, other than Carnarvon. But again, the sort of idea of the supernatural taking over, and, the curse of the mummy and all of these things scares people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but here's the thing. Let's sort of talk about it, because most of the tombs of all Egyptian royalty, so going back over the dynasties, are said to kind of have that same curse, right? So when you're opening the tomb, there's said to be this, sort of curse written. There's kind of, this is sort of a very weak translation of what it says. And I'm going to say really weak because it's been Christianized, okay? So we know that this is not what is written on this tomb, for sure, 100%. But the idea is, a writer sort of said that this was a similar curse. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be ye man that spares these stones, and cursed he be who moves my bones. Well, we know that there is not going to be any reference to Jesus in any Egyptian writings, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing. And I mean, this is kind of a William Shakespeare epitaph. It goes back to 1660. So they're sort of taking that idea and applying it to this tomb, right? Because Shakespeare was well known. So why not take an epitaph that Shakespeare wrote and kind of plug it into Egyptian stuff? Why not? Makes a lot of sense to me. But we got to remember, this is sort of, just sliding out of late Victorian, Edwardian period. And we're, so people still have this mindset that, this is something that could happen. So trying to prevent anything that was going to possibly happen to the